Wow. That's cool. I feel like well, I never went to college, but that's like that's what I saw in the movies about like the college experience, like the dormitories and parties.
Yeah.
Uh,
All the time. In every school. I can go to Syracuse on a Wednesday because why not? I was like, I would. It's like going from my house to Brooklyn. Might as well.
That's cool. Cool. How was lunch? It's good. Cool. Okay, so we were setting up PG promise. Get rid of this. And this is what we have at the moment. So we're requiring PG promise. We have a connection string, which is basically a URL to where our database is running. We know that. So this is similar to what we have once we build servers. You know, the database server Postgres is running at this URL, Postgres/localhost 5432. And then in there, we're interested in connecting to specifically the Facebook DB database. Right? And then we say const DB equal PGP connection string, so that PGP again PG promise connects to this database specifically. The database identified with this URL. Now here is that we can start using the database. Yes.
Could you connect to multiple databases in one file?
Good question. You can connect to multiple databases. I could say like I don't know. Maybe I could call this like const Facebook DB, and then I could say, let's say I also want to. Let's say I'm building an app that will connect all the social media for some reason. So I could just do copy that, and then let's say I'm gonna keep my users from Facebook in one database and the ones in Twitter in a different one. You could just do Twitter here. You need to make sure that this is gonna be another URL. So yes, you can connect to multiple databases. It's very rare though. I think, well, it's so rare. I've never done it. I've never had the need to do it. Yep. And then here, like once we start putting our databases in the internet, this URL is going to be different. This URL is going to be a URL in Amazon if you're using AWS to host your database or any of the other service providers for database hosting, and you're going to replace that in here. This could be, this URL could be literally in the internet. It could be another computer, maybe in another continent too. So, cool. So this DB here is the key. This DB is a connection to our Facebook database. So now, let's make our first query. So two things that are important is, remember that PG promise returns a promise. That's why they use promise in their name. Now, let's do here. So DB has a number of methods. The ones that we're going to be using the most are, let me list them here. I don't think they're not listed in the lesson, but there is a link in the lesson for getting more information about it. The ones that we're going to be using are db.any, db.one, and db.none. These are some of the most commonly used methods. We're going to see why they put those names. So, but first here, I'm going to say db.any. So there is a method called db.any. This method and all the others too accept the first argument or expect the first argument to be a SQL string. A SQL string of this kind. Select star from users. Just like that. So db.any parenthesis in quotations SQL string select star from users. This is regular good old SQL, which you are masters at now. Yes.
Is it case sensitive?
It's case insensitive. I do always prefer to uppercase the keywords. Yes. Yes.
Does it have to have a semicolon?
It doesn't have to have a semicolon at the end. I think you could include it or skip it. Yeah. The PG promise will add it for you. Cool. And then this any is for how many rows to expect from this query. And this is true for this. So for any is for any number of rows that is 1,000, 5, 0, or 1. 1 is explicitly to expect one row. None is to expect no rows back. So we're going to drill this a little bit more, but you remember that, for instance, we select star from users, we'll select as many rows as users we have, right? But do you remember when we were like limiting that, or from the post or likes, when we were limiting that to only one? In that case, we could use any because any is for like all of them. We could also use one for expecting one row to be back. And then you remember that when you do select, you get a result, a result table. But when you do insert, you don't get anything. When you do an insert on SQL, you get nothing. You just get the text insert 0, 1, something like that. That is for this one, db none. Because we don't expect any rows back, but we're gonna get to see that. So db.any, and then this returns a promise. What do we know about promises? Wait for them. What else?
They're asynchronous.
They're asynchronous. That's correct. What else? I mean,
They can succeed or fail.
they can succeed or fail. So just the same way we deal with promises with Axios, we can deal with promises with PG promise. So we have two approaches. One is that then that catch, or async await with try catch. Let's do that then that catch first, and then we can move on to async await. So this returns a promise. So you want to attach a dot then to it, so that when it's done, this executes. And I'm going to do a dot catch still. Catch error. Say if there is an error, console log at the error. So if there's an error, console log the error. If we succeed, then here we're gonna get the rows that this SQL will return. So I'm gonna say rows, and let's console log rows here to see what we get. Or actually, let's just send those rows. Let's do rest.json rows to send them. I'm going to remove this rest.send because I actually don't want to respond yet until we get a response from the database. Since these are only one argument, I'm going to remove this parenthesis so that is a little bit cleaner. So we have this. db.any is going to return a promise. with that promise, so that if once we get a result, we do something with the result, and with that catch in case the database is down, or maybe we don't have a users table. That will be another reason for this to fail. If it could fail. So I'm going to console log the rows and res.json the rows directly to the front end, or to whoever is requesting this. Questions to this point before we try it out? Yes, Cameron. Cool. So this is, yes, Owen.
Will the string also catch like nested SQL strings, like the big ones we do in the lab?
That's a good question. Yes, you will type those in here as well. Yeah, this string. When it's a long query, what I like to do is I create a variable outside, something like query or SQL, and I type it there, and I just pass in the name of the variable here. Mm-hmm.
Because there's a catch, is that why we don't have to release?
That's correct, because we're dealing with, so there's two approaches for dealing with promises. One is async await with try catch. The other approach is that then that catch on the promise. Mm-hmm. Yes?
With the response will be JSON.
The response will be JSON. Yeah, so that's a good question, because you would expect when we do a select star from users, we literally get a table with rows. This is all the magic of PG promise, converting that table that you do when you do select star from users into JSON data. We're gonna see what that data looks like. So I have this here. Now let's open the browser. Make that request. So I'm gonna make a request to /localhost 3000/users. Hit send. I don't have the server running. Nodemon out.js. Refresh this to make the network request, and we have some data coming in. We got an array of objects. We got an array of objects. Every object represents a row. Every object represents a row. Yes.
Like each key is like a column.
Beautiful. Yes. Each key in these objects are the column of our table. Check with whoever is sitting next to you to make sure that we're all on the same page. That you are seeing an array of objects once you make that request. Oh, okay. I think we could use all this. All the database.
You never say.
Yeah.
So we never say.
you want to use like where, let's say we're continent America, you need the America to be single quotes instead of single quotes. So you will need to put the entire string on or back.
I was using full place. It's like for me, I was confused.
It's like something
Oh, it's just gonna be a thing of the actual data. It doesn't matter when you put there.
yeah, the name doesn't so you get a pair of seals. DB.sql does not exist. This is common for all. This one is a little bit trickier. So those two files are not out, right? But if you scroll down a little more, there should be one that is out. Just scroll a little bit more. You go down here. A little more. I see, okay. So it is that this thing is not that easy. That is this here, the after the last slash is the name of your database. The name you use to create database. So like yeah. I'll be there. Maybe you.
And first, when I have this not commented out, it's just
Yeah, so you mentioned two things. One is you're not seeing data. Two, when you have this, you will never see the users. That is because in here they are the users. So that one should be after the users. That's one.
that's if we use
So like,
that's if we do track that
we still have it somewhere. Try showing it here. Try showing the server here. Alright. You have that somewhere, so go on this project, you can match Shift F. So search your entire project and search for slash users.
Oh, you know what? The one I had is but I had
Click on the magnifying glass.
I needed the, how do you do it?
How do you do it? Oh yeah, I can. You have two tabs.
Yeah, I forgot.
Oh, okay. Cool. So everyone was able to see the data that came from the database. Cool. That's it. You can go home now. But yeah, like not kidding. Yeah, this is all the others are gonna be working exactly like this. It's just that instead of select, we're gonna have an insert. Also, we want to change. For now, this which one you use is not that important. Yeah, questions about this? Yes, do this.
Since any is any, could any be 0?
Any could be 0, yes. Let's try to get a 0. What if you do select star from users where ID equal 1,000 or 100? What is the result of this query going to be? At least I don't have a user call with ID 100. Maybe if you have one. So let's see. An empty array. So this is, if we go back to this diagram, Postgres. If we go back to this diagram now, I'm not streaming, but I'm recording. I'll put it as soon as the class ends. If we go back to this diagram, here, PG promise is standing right here between our server, our Express server, and PostgreSQL. And PG promise is, taking our SQL query from JavaScript land, sending it to Postgres to be executed. And Postgres executes it, it's back the result of that promise that we were holding on to, and then it resolves, we send it to the client. So it's sort of like, there's 3 sort of hops that are being done here. So we have the browser server, DB. So what we're doing is, or the full picture is, the browser, when we hit refresh, will send an error request to our server, an HTTP request to our server, HTTP. to our server. Then our server is using PG promise to send a request to our database. PG promise. Then the database replies, if they found any data, replies back with that data to the server, and some rows. Then the server sees the data, it went well, then the server replies back to the client with an HTTP response. HTTP rec, HTTP response. And this is why we call full stack, because we are able to code here, here, and here. This is the full stack, and as in that diagram, we call this the backend, the server, and the database, and the front end, anything that runs in the browser. So now, before our information was sort of staying here, when we were, the inventory of the vegetables in red, that information was staying here. Now we're persisting it to the database. Yes?
Can you put like the program which is raw on slide or
This one? Yeah. I have this in the lecture notes repo. I can push that code now. Let me do git add. PG promise. So if you go to the repo where we keep the class nodes, do you remember that? You'll see it on a folder called Postgres and PG promise. I also want to try something later on where you could connect to my VS Code and see my code like live on your screen. I have to look more close into that, because that way then you could have access to all my files, check the code like in real time, and see what I'm typing, as well as exploring other files too. So that if you have questions or doubts, you can just go to the file that you want to check out and look at it without me having to have it in the screen because I'm on a different point or something. Cool. Other questions about db.any? So in the lecture notes, lecture, I linked these resources. Learn by example, must read for learning how to deal with PG promise by example. The documentation, the DB methods here. This will talk about for instance, this talks about any, right? And so on. We're gonna see query formatting next. Let's see what else we have here. Okay, so the next thing will be just to look at an insert. Also, let's do this one with an async await just so that we have it as reference. So I'm literally gonna do the same thing. Maybe I'm just gonna copy this. But I have a bunch of files. Oh, I see what you're saying. Lesson code. So this is unit 3. Postgres. Here. This is all the code that I have at the moment. Cool. So I'm gonna copy this code. I'm gonna comment it. I'm gonna also maybe add a comment for ES5 method of dealing with promises. So this is the sort of the all method then catch. Async await is ES6 stuff. So let's do ES6. We call this async await with try catch. So who could guide me through how to write this? Hugo? We will still need DB any, yes. Say that again? The same one, to get all the users. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we know that this was going to return a promise. But then how do we deal with that promise using async await? Yes. So let's declare a variable here. What would we call this variable? Users is a fine name, or rows as well. Yeah, that's a good point. Here I could have called these rows just users because I know that we're going to get a list. We know that we're going to get a list of users. So let's do it users. Await. Yeah, so we do let users await db.any. If we're using await, then we need to specify that this is an async function, like that. And then, so that will be the async await part. Anytime you're doing async await, you should always do try catch. Try this, otherwise catch here. Console.log error. Just spell it out. And then we can just do res.json users. This is the ES6 version using async await with try catch. This is a little bit shorter, as well as a little bit more readable. So let's try this. Go to our local host, refresh the page. Maybe the database is not, maybe the server is not running. It is not. Node-mon app.js running. Refresh this, and we have all our users back. ES6 async await with try catch way of handling promises. Which is why, you know, the concept of promise, how things could take long, they could succeed or fail. We want to account for whatever happens. So you see, I think this is the first time you see promises being used in a different context from a network request or from Axios. And if you think about it, it's sort of similar. You know, the server is still sending a request to the database, a little bit more obscure. We don't have to care about how that request is sent. PG promise is taking care of that. But this is, again, an asynchronous operations. I could have my server in the US and my database in Russia, and still have them connected. And you know that we don't know how long it's going to take to fetch that information from a database in the other side of the world. Cool. Questions about what we're seeing here, how we get the users. Yes.
Kind of an offshoot of this. You said that when dealing with promises, it's sometimes better to display like a bit of a rotating thing. Would that happen before in the try? Like how do you, I mean, if this is way off.
Just like as a quick answer, that will be, we'll handle that in the front end.
Oh, I see.
Because you said display, right? And
Yeah.
for the most part, like our server is not going to display anything. The front end, the website is the one that's going to display the information. So it will be there. Cool. Try to break this query and see what you get. See what kind of errors PG promise are going to throw at you. Because you're going to be seeing them often. How do you when you connect to just PSQL, that's the time you and you can connect to
Change the alt to star to
okay, so this is
Not sure if this is
oh, but you so I guess this is that
this says binary stuff. Because whenever we sold it, that's what they were at.
so something is here.
So, you won't work with this binary. You want to change the port? So nothing
What you need to do is see, like, execute your small file before you sign.
I love it. If you don't keep it open, there's nothing.
Just to see how because I think you do have try to separate
Can't I just create a circle? Just one file. So by default,
That's why we should still get rid of the
What? We just didn't try hard enough. Okay, what questions? What were some of the errors that you found? And what did you do to? What can I do to replicate your error? Start to name. But would this throw an error? Oh, it seems that it crashed. Let's look at the terminal. Column name does not exist. Nice. Column name does not exist. Oh, and this, it even gives you a hint. Perhaps you meant to reference the column users.age. It's a little bit not very helpful, but it's a hint nonetheless. Cool. Right, this is PG promise failing because there is no, actually this is not PG promise failing, this is the database complaining that there is no name column, then PG promise rejects that promise. Peter?
I was going to say I changed users to people.
Users to people. What do you think the error is going to say? If we try to do this, what is the error going to say? If it says this for the column, table not found, repeat this request. Oh, this is another thing. When your server crashes like this, you will need to kill it. It will not recover from it. It will not. It will not recover.
Can you do concept send?
Yes, that would be the best way. Yeah. Let's do that. Instead of just console logging the error, no, let's provide a little bit more structure here. So instead of sending the user's raw, I'm gonna send an object like this, and then I'm gonna say the payload is going to be the users. This could be anything, payload, data, whatever you want to call it, and then like message, success, retrieved all the users. So I just put my users inside of another object that has two keys, payload and message. So that when we make this request, we get, oh, the server's not running. Node mod. So that when we make this request, oh, I'm still selecting from people. Let's see it working first. We see the payload is going to be an array of users, the same array we were sending earlier. I just sort of nested it a little bit. And now we have a message, success, retrieve all the users. This is something you want to do, which is sort of standardize your responses. So that once you have a front end, your responses can reliably, whenever you're handling the response, you can reliably trust that there's going to be some keys available. In this case, this is like my standard, where I put the data that I received back on something called payload or data, and then a message to help me, if something goes wrong, I'll put it there, or sort of, what this query retrieved. So let's do that, payload. And then in the case of an error, let's do rest.json message. There is no payload, there is no data that we want to send. Error. Something went wrong. And here, you don't want to send a 200. 200 is for OK. Let's do rest.status 500, which is the server crash. Or there was a server error. Not that the server crashed. There was a server error. I'm going to leave the console log there. So that Oh, let's see this working. Refresh. We got our users or our array in the payload, and we have our message. Success retrieved all users. So going back to the errors, if we change this to people, now let's refresh here. Error, something went wrong. You don't want to sort of leak information about what went wrong to the client, but you'll probably log the error, which is what we're doing here as well. So we are also logging the error, and then if you go to a terminal, we can see what the error was. So now the error says relation people does not exist, which is what Michael said, with one word different. Relation, or he said table people doesn't exist. Here it's saying relation people. Remember that relation is another key word for table. Cool. Those are some ways in which PG promise can fail. Other questions about this? This is how we can get data. Next, we're going to see how to insert data. Yes?
What is DB.1?
Let's talk about that. So I said these are the most commonly used: db.any, db.1, db.none. Change this to 1. Run it and inspect the error closely. Yes, but hopefully the message will. No. Students, could you pass me my water bottle? No, thank you. Mm-hmm.
I would say it's like change the user to user and select from the computer users.
Thank you, users. Wait, were you pointing out that I was missing the S? Or
If you run without the S, it's going to point to your username to the computer.
oh, yeah, that's. Oh. Yeah, we discover a hidden table called user that keeps track of the user that is logged in. Yeah. I meant here users. Something went wrong. This was actually the error that I was expecting you to find, which is this. Query result error. The message says multiple rows were not expected by PG promise. Received 5 rows, this was the query, and PG promise was not expecting 5 rows. How many was PG promise expecting? 1, exactly 1. So you could do everything with that any, but that 1 and that none are there, so that sort of as a to be more secure, or to be more sure about what you're getting back. If you expect a query to give you only one thing, you could just do it with db.1, and in case your query gives you more than 1 row, more than 1 result, then it's going to fail out, and you're going to find out why a query is returning more than 2 rows when you were expecting 1. Yes?
Can you rest that JSON?
Yeah, I could rest that JSON the error, but as I said, I don't want to leak any internal information. It will return this. It will return this object. Oh, I think yes, there is some hidden information that will also be sent. Yeah, in this case. Yeah, but you don't want to leak that kind of information to your user, because then they could, see why was it that it crashed, and then maybe keep attacking you on that end. And also, like, for instance, if you, well, this is not an error, that's not going to that, but yeah, you will just show something like error, something went wrong. Reply with that. And then you make sure you log the error so that you, the developer, once you're seeing, oh, why is my app not working, you can inspect your private logs and see why it's not working. Cool, so any final questions before we see how to make an insert? Cool, so we saw that, yes, let's change this back to many, because we know that we're gonna get, oh, no, sorry, any. I think there's actually many too. Let's see, many will error out if it receives 0 or 1. But yeah, we could do everything with any, but sort of like similar to the HTTP protocol, how we could, we could send data on the body of a GET request, or we could remove something from the server with a POST request, but we shouldn't do that. We should try to follow the standard. Yes?
Is the status 200 default?
Yes.
Or is that something, so that's not something you have to explicitly.
That's correct. That's not something we have to explicitly say, because it's the default, and somewhere in the Express documentation it says so. Mm-hmm. Cool, so let's look at how to do an insert, and then we can get working in the lab, which is basically building more of this with this same database, actually. Cool, so for insert, so first, when would we want to use an insert? Somebody else. Brianne. When you want to add a new row, in this case, what kind of row do we want to add? A user, that's correct. So let's say now we want to register users in our app, right? So we could provide a route like /users/sign-up or register, send a post request there with the data of a user, and then save it in this diagram. Yes, so we have a form in the front end. You send that form as a post request to your server. Server receives the data. Then the server will use Pt2 to insert that data into the database. The database replies with, okay, I made the insert. The server replies, you're good to go. You're now welcome, registered. So let's do that now. So for doing that, then we're going to do router. We're in the user's router, remember. Router.post, let's say /register. Rec rest. Remember that all these routes inside of the user router are already inside /users. So we technically have 2 routes here. We're going to have users/register. Now, that data that we're going to send, so first let's think about what data do we need to register a user. We need first name, last name, age, anything else? So we need to make sure that we send this information from the front end or whoever is making the request. First name, last name, and age. So I guess first, let's send this information using Postman. How do we send this information using Postman to our server? And what if I want to console log that information? Where is that information going to be available for us to use? Brianna? We could send it in the body. So I guess let's open Postman here. Opening Postman. Cool, and then here, what if I want to send it in the body? How do I do that? But I guess maybe let's create a new tab. And then we need to select here post, the URL that we want to do, localhost 3000, but instead of this, users /register. And then you said go here to body. Anything else?
I think it's FSW.
Thank you. Yes, select the format of your body. And then here, just the information that we want to send, right? We want to send the first name. You could use your own name. Last name. Age. Cool. So I'm going to send this. Or questions about this? Questions about sort of building a network request, a post network request with Postman. Okay, now the question is, would my server be able to respond as of right now? Why not? Well, we don't have the DB. Hugo, what did you say? Yeah, we didn't tell our server what to do, how to handle these requests, right? So if I try to send it, it's just gonna hang because server cannot find that route for handling, or it can find the route, but it's not we're not sending any response basically, right? So let's now go in here. Let's do res.send post request arrived at /users/register. Let's just reply with something just to make sure that this works. Go back to Postman, send this. We have a post request arrived at /user/register. Good. So you always want to try things small first to make sure that everything is connected. So that's connected. Now, what if I want to reply back with the information that I just got? Yes, Hugo. I could just send the request.body, right? Right, so I guess the point was, where is the data that the user sent in the form is going to be in the request.body or rec.body. So we could do, let's do console log rec.body. Let's say sort of with the standard we have is, let's change this to JSON. Let's do payload or message. payload, let's just send the request body as a sort of to start. And then let's try this out. Enter. And we have that the payload is just whatever we sent, the request body, and the message post request arrived at. Right? But the point here is that we have rec.body. Rec.body contains the data that we sent. Now what we're going to do is just going to grab this data from here and give it to pgpromise to insert it in the database. Cool. Or any questions before we do that? Okay, so should we do it with Async Await or then.catch? Async Await, cool. So remember the async here. Then try catch. Try catch. Then we're gonna say, let's do this. Await db.none and then reply with this. Otherwise, plus.json. Hey, nothing, a message. There was an error registering the user. So here, the only thing that changed is db.none. We're gonna see why I left why I don't have a variable here. So do you remember that db.none is for when pgpromise doesn't expect anything back. And when we're making an insert, we don't expect any rows back. That's just the way Postgres works. When you make an insert, you don't get anything back. You just said, you just see that text insert 01, saying that the insert was correct. Yes? Yes. Oh, but then here I'm gonna make the insert query. Cool. So here we'll do insert into users first name, the columns, first name, last name, age, and then values. Now this is going to be long, so I think I want to break it down a little bit more. So let's do this. Let insert query equal, put this there. This is going to be long, so I'm just going to separate it. Do that one, insert query. just put this equal into its own string. And then we could concatenate it with plus, or we could just do backticks here. Let's just do backticks. So we could do insert into users, and then values. Insert into users and then values, and here we're gonna specify the values that we want to insert. Now there is sort of a thing here that we want to be aware of. So for now I'm just gonna do $1, comma $2, $3. Wait, format this like that. Note that I have this string in backticks, not in single quotes, not in double quotes. Having it in backticks allows me to have it in multiple lines. This is just for readability purposes. You could also do it in one line, that's fine. So I have insert into users. You could call this insert query, some people call it just SQL. Cool. So the point is that we have our query here. We have our SQL query here. And then what we want is we want to plug in the values that come from the request body into these placeholders, 1, 2, and 3. We do that by specifying a second argument to db.none. This second argument is going to be an array of the data that we want to plug in. So I want to do rec first name first, rec body first name, comma rec body last name, comma rec body age. Thank you. Yes.
Can you put all in the message query? Like there's information inside.
You mean like, could we just do a string interpolation here? You can, but you are opening yourself to an attack called SQL injection, which is if I put my first name I could be, instead of my name, I could say drop database Facebook DB, and then I put this in here, and then that's gonna remove, or that has the potential of removing your database. I had to do. It's tricky, but yes, there is an attack called SQL injection, which is when you get input from the user and you don't sanitize it, or you don't do anything with it, you just plug it into your SQL. Then the user could technically write any SQL as the username and do anything they want with your database. Yeah, maybe we could explore that later. But in this fashion, PG Promise is doing some input sanitation for us, which is gonna check that it's not gonna. How can I express this? Let's look at this. So actually, let's look at it first, and then we can look at the documentation. Yeah. So what this is going to do is, so here now we have a db.whatever method, and we're passing in 2 arguments. The first one is a string, which is a SQL string that I call insert query. No, that's the first one. The first one is the insert query SQL string, and the second one is an array with the values that I want to plug in my SQL string. These values are going to be plugged in by PG Promise. Now, $1 refers to the first item in the array, $2 to the second item in the array, and $3 to the third item in the array. Note that these are not index-based. This is the first element in the array, second element, and third element. So it's not 0, 1, 2, but 1, 2, 3. Why? You will need to ask the developer of PG Promise. The important point is that these values, the rec.first name will be plugged into this in here. The rec.body.last name will be plugged in here. Rec.body.age will be plugged in right here. Now let's see. So message will be, like user register. So let's see this. Or questions before we try it out. Good question. Because when we make an insert, we don't expect any rows back. Well, when you do a select, you expect a number of rows back. When you make an insert, you don't. Sure. So the key thing here is, this part. This part. The db.none, the query itself, and then the arguments to be plugged into the query. Yes, Cameron.
Do you not put commas to it, or what's more biased?
Where do you mean the commas? I have the commas here. These ones are required. Yeah. Yep. This is still a regular SQL string. What PG Promise is going to do under the hood is it's going to check if there is any $sign something. And then it's going to look at the second argument, which in this case is this array, this one. And it's going to start to plug in things with some under the hood input sanitation, making sure there is nothing fishy. Cool. Yes, Owen?
Those are just placeholders for the value, the $1, $2, $3.
That's correct. Those are placeholders for the value. These are known as, I linked this on the lecture notes. These are known as query formatting parameters. There is $1, 2, and 3 are just a way in which we could specify those. There are some other ways, one more convenient than others. But let's look at this one first. Cool, so once we have this, let's try it out and see if we get a new user. So on Postman, first let's try to get all the users. Just copy this, get request, paste that, get request, see all the users, cool. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 users. Now let's try to register one with a new one with the post. This might fail. We might have bugs in our code. So I'm trying to register myself here. Let's send that by hitting enter. Nice. We say user register. So that says it went correctly. Otherwise, we would have sent the message there was an error. Now look at the list of your users, and there should be a new one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There I am. A new user was inserted. Yes.
It's actually not saved.
It is saved. It should be saved. I can kill the server now. Look, I'm gonna kill my server. Here we will lose the data in the past. But now this data, this new user is saved in the database. It's not saved in the server anymore. Let's run the server again. Let's get all the users one more time. I'm still there. Check my actual database. It should still be there. The user was inserted. Maybe you're still connecting to the wrong database? No. So, yes.
For some reason, my last name count as no.
That's probably a spelling mistake. There's probably a spelling mistake in here. It's probably a spelling mistake here or in your...
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, John? Oh, it's up like this? This is it. More? So, make sure you are able to see the newly registered user and raise your hand and we can go on. Oh, I see. That's because you removed the you make that get the server by default server browser by default gets makes it gets so to make a push request. So I guess we're not handling that get request to Slack, right? We're only handling a push request to Slack. With the browser, the only way which we can make a get a push request is if we have a form. We don't have a form yet.
Oh,
So to make a
it was the
push
same from
request,
last time.
we use the way that I can. But instead of register, we just write for you.
Yeah. So you mean the one that's been now
Async values because make it count. To the left of the person. So do that in the square.
Now you try and get requests, and you should see all your users. Questions, comments on the insert.
So make sure, like, some key concepts here are the query formatting parameters. These are how you plug in data into your SQL queries. There are some that are a little bit more explicit. You should check that out. What was the other thing? Oh, the methods. db.any. If you go to the documentation, which I also linked it here, db methods, you're gonna have .any. Have some description of what it does. You will also see some others. Any, each. There's some that I haven't even used. Many, execute a query that expects one or more rows. When the query returns no rows, the method rejects. Here, excuse me. If we search for like that one, we'll find it. There seems to be one called one or none when you expect something to return one thing or nothing. That one. Yeah. One. Executes a query that expects exactly one row of data. When 0 or more than one rows are returned, the method rejects. So that's that. Let's see. Yeah. Anything else? How to insert data. So now you wanna make sure you're using the query formatting parameters. Let's look at see what a SQL injection is. Just so that SQL injection OWASP. Let's look at this. A SQL injection attack consists of insertion or injection of a SQL query via the input data from the client to the application. A successful SQL injection exploit can read sensitive data from the database, modify the database, insert, update, delete, execute an administration operation on the database, etc. So we don't want, let's see if there is maybe an example we can look at. SQL and how to prevent it. There's a quick, no, I don't think we can find. Yeah, I didn't check any of this before, but we want to use the PG promise query formatting strings because let's try this. I'm gonna try to do here. I'm gonna copy this just so that we have a separate route. I'm gonna do users slash say user slash kill. We're gonna do this to see if we can demonstrate a SQL injection. I'm not sure, I didn't try this before coming, but let's try nonetheless. So we want to use this to prevent, we want to use the PG promise query formatting strings to prevent this kind of stuff, which is somebody specifying the first name instead of the first name. Really, they specify something like drop table users, right? So if we don't do this in this fashion, we just use, you know, our backticks, we could try to do something like this, right? Reg.body.first name. Let's just do it with the first name. Then insert query. Everything else I think could stay the same. So here, you know, I'm sort of trying to use the string interpolation via the backticks that we have in JavaScript to literally inject this text, first name, into this place in my SQL query. But that is extremely dangerous because then anybody on a form could specify the first name as a SQL string and then mess up with our data. So let's see if this works. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to create a post, but let's say I'm a malicious user. So I'm going to specify in the post body, instead of my actual first name, I'm going to specify, first I want to close this parenthesis, this one. Do I have not null on my table? We don't have not null, right? So I'm just going to close that here. This parenthesis is going to close this one. And then I'm going to say maybe like semicolon to end that there. Drop table users. And then semicolon, comment out all the rest. Let's see if this works. So they said, I'm not sure. Drop table users, hit send. First name, congratulations, user register. Let's see if our table users is still there. TD. No, which one is the DT? It seems that it's still there. Users table. Did we get an error? No, we didn't get any errors. Oh, that's because I'm still registering. I meant to say kill. There was an error. The users table is still there. Did I? There was an error, and I never console log the error to see what's going on. Let's console log the errors here. Let's try again with Postman. User/kill. Error, scanner Y error. Error, syntax error at or near parentheses. So seems that we have to specify, right, we saw this error in the past where I left values as empty. You remember that? We need to specify a value. So let's just give a dummy value here. Specify sort of those, but I'm gonna need to specify first name, last name because we have all this. 45. Let's try again. Kill this. Send. There was an error. Oh, but it tried to remove it. You see, it tried to remove it. Use drop cascade to drop. Cannot drop table users because other objects depend on it. So it tried to drop the table. I could just drop the post table and then the users table, and I fucked up the database. Here, let's drop everything. You know what? Let's drop the database. Drop Facebook DB. Drop database, thank you. Let's see if this is running. Let's just restart it so we are sure. There was an error. Prevent in transaction block. Oh, this is Pt2 doing some help. Cannot drop database inside of a transaction block. But I think you get the point. That I can then type any SQL here. And just so that we just see it, let's drop table posts, then drop table users. Let's try to send this. User registered. See if we have any tables. No tables. So this is a SQL injection, and you want to prevent against that by not plugging in unsanitized text, like I did here, plugging in unsanitized text, allowing anybody to do whatever they want with your database. That's why the developer of Pt2 created this for us to safely put in there. I guess we should try it to see if it works now. Like we're trying to send that first name as a SQL injection. If this works, then I don't know what I'm talking about. Let's see the database because we removed the tables. PSQL.f. So let's see if PG promise is actually really preventing that SQL injection. Run the server again. Maybe let's get all the users first. We got all the users, that's great. Now I'm gonna send the exact same to send. User registered. Oh no. Cool. Okay, it didn't remove them. So I think this is probably PG promise helping us. Oh wait, actually, I guess it did insert a user with that name. Let's start from users. Yes, beautiful. See, it gave that user that name instead of actually interpreting the SQL. We don't want it to interpret the SQL because this SQL is malicious, right? So always use the PG promise query formatting parameters. Cool. Any final questions before we work in the lab? Again, let's look at the lab first. The lab is just going to be taking this, what we have now, and adding stuff for getting the posts, adding likes, and so on. Oh, actually, before we do that, I need to build a small front end for this. Where am I? Close this, close this, close this, close this, and then we are back here. Yeah. Cool. PG promise we inserting. As I said here, other methods besides .none and .any exist. See their use and reasoning there. Here's also the complete file. We're running the server. Now let's build a small front end for this, which I'm basically just gonna talk about, which is this HTML. Let's copy this HTML. Let me push this code. And then I just push that code if you want to look at it. Then I'm going to create, so we're here in the server file and the server folder. I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to create a folder called client. Now in this client folder, now I have two folders. Now I have two folders, client and server. Now on client, I'm going to create an index.html and an index.js file to build a small front end. Touch client index.html and client index.js. Thank you. Now, if we list the client, we have those two folders, those two files. So let's go on our code. Let's look at the, oh, I guess I didn't open this. Code. So we have our server that we were exploring earlier. Now our client has these two files, index.js and index.html. Let's paste this HTML here. Hopefully it doesn't have any weird characters because I copied and pasted from GitHub. And let's look at what this HTML is doing first. So it seems that it's importing Axios. Then it has a body where we have a header at new user that has a form. That form has 1, 2, 3 input fields for first name, last name, an age, and a button for submit. And then under there we have another header, all users, that has a UL that it doesn't have anything yet, but we can imagine that it's going to have a bulleted list of users. Questions about this HTML? Oh, that's good, yeah. Thank you. Cool, so once we have that, let's populate our JS file and take 5 minutes to look at that JS file. Try to figure out what that JS file is doing. Take some time to look at that JS file. Yes. Yes, this is gonna be payload, yeah. In my case. Then discuss with your neighbors what the JavaScript file is doing to check that you have a mutual understanding.
It works. And the same order. No, that's weird. Maybe it's always something I know. I'm so confused. Wait, what? Yeah, see, I would say that.
Cool. Who can share out what this file is doing, what this JavaScript file is doing in conjunction with the HTML file? Do this.
So it's as soon as the downloads, it runs load users,
Uh-huh.
also sets up, I guess, after that, it
Uh-huh.
quickly sets up the listener for a submit on the form.
Right.
The load users,
Uh-huh.
load users is first grabbing the list item and emptying it because you always wanted to clear it out whenever it runs.
Uh-huh.
Then you're going to build a response out of the promise of the information from users/all, which is going to, I guess in this case, get you all like a JSON of all of the users.
Oh, I see. This here, this for us will be a little bit different because we don't have this route, right?
Right.
We don't have /user/all.
You'd have to,
Right.
you'd have to get rid of just all, I think. And
Yeah.
everything else
Yeah.
was fine. Then it's going over the payload from that JSON that it gets when the promise is fulfilled, and then as it loops over it, for every object in
Yeah.
I guess for every user basically,
Yeah.
it builds a new list item and then puts it into the list at the bottom.
Right.
And then the
Yeah.
form,
Maybe somebody else.
Yeah.
So you already hear what the load user function is doing. Cool. Now somebody else explains what the add user form submitted is doing. Owen.
Making the function asynchronous so that it doesn't get like, I forgot the term, it's like, is it called in the promise or something, or so it works, so it works. Event
Yeah.
out of event default is so that it doesn't like refresh every time you try to enter something. And then the first name is taking the value from the first name input box, and the last name is taking the value from the last name input box, and the third one is the age, and it's basically using that information in the Axios post
Uh-huh.
to add a new user,
Yep.
and then it loads and then updates the list.
And then it loads the users again. This is a little bit inefficient because every time we add a user, we're getting all the users again. But this is not the main point. The main point is sort of connecting everything. So also this is missing the try catch, which we should always have. But yeah, so load user, as Douglas explained, is making a network request to get all the users. And then for each user is creating a list item and appending those to the list, to the URL. Now add users form submitted is a function that is being fired when the user submits the form, clicking on submit or hitting enter. What this function is doing, as Owen explained, it is grabbing all the data from these input boxes, then making a post request with Axios to this URL, sending that data in the body of the request. So just to reiterate there. Cool. Let's try this out. Did anyone try it already? It works?
Yeah, the only thing is like, so it doesn't like, when you refresh it, it stays, so it doesn't like, so you put in like the wrong thing, it just is there. It needs like a delete thing.
But I'm not sure we specified that in the lab. You're free to do that, yeah, as a practice. So let's open this simple HTML and JavaScript with the browser, and where the user supposed to appear right away, right? Maybe the server is not running. Oh, my server is not running. Nodemon. And if I inspect here, I'm gonna see the error saying error connection refused, meaning, yeah, my server is not running. So let's run the server. Nodemon server app.js. Refresh this page. And we have all the users, including our failed SQL injection. Including our failed SQL injection. Then we have a full stack app. Let's register Charles Darwin. I think he recently was like 200 years old. Submit. It appears there immediately. Maybe just add George. I don't know how to spell George. George Washington. How old is he? If he was alive, how old would he be? 300? And then add, we got George Washington in our social media app. Yeah, so in here, oh yeah, there was one change that we had to do is this loop here. This loop is iterating over the payload property of the response. Do you remember that in my server, I reply back with an object that has two keys, one payload and another one message? So that object that has those two keys is response.data. Once we get it with Axios. And then the data that I'm interested in is in the payload property. So I'll just do response.data.payload. What we could do also is just like do const users equal response.data. And then so that, that data.payload. So the loop reads a little bit better if we do users. This will still work. Let's separate this a little bit. So remember that the response of my network request is a JSON object with two properties, payload and message. I'm interested in the payload explicitly because that payload has the array with all my users. Then I'm looping over the users array, and for each one I'm creating an li item that will be appended to the DOM. Yes, Michael. The function below this one? What's up? Uh-huh.
And then right after you load users, so it loads every single user, right?
Wait, where? Here?
Yeah. You save it to response.
Oh, yeah,
Well, you know, actually use it.
that's correct.
Could you use the response?
Yeah.
So only trigger those users and just add that one person?
Yes, that's correct. That could be done, yeah. Or you could, just send like a notification or redirect the user to a different page. Questions about this? Load users. Now we are truly full stack web developers. But that's true, but that's so So what we're gonna be doing, working in the lab, is just adding. So if you go to Canvas, wait, no, is this the lab? Yeah. Yeah. So here, what we're gonna be doing is complementing what we already have. So here is like continuing from the started project. This started project is the one that we coded here the morning up until now. So now if you don't have it, which you should, you could get it here. This has some starting. This is the starting code that we have. It's also shared on the lecture code repo. I'll suggest you just stick with the one that you started with now instead of changing to another one that one of us wrote. And what you're gonna do is create these routes for getting all the posts, that match this user ID, and for adding a post. This post slash register should be something more like post dash add. Some people already forked it, but yeah, this is fine. You could do slash post slash register or slash post slash new slash post slash add. That's all fine. Then in the front end, what you're going to be adding is some UI elements to display a list of all the posts, display all the posts given for a user, and a form to add a new post. So for creating a new post, you could probably have something like a form where you can specify the body of the post. Let's say like I'm on vacation. What else do you specify about the post? That's it, right? And then you click send. Oh, maybe the username that is creating that post. So maybe the body of the post, a text box for the body, and another one for the username that is creating that post. And create a new post in that way. Display all the posts similar to the way we're displaying all the users. It could be sort of like a list. So that will be part one. For part two, we want to add a new table, the likes table, so that we can represent a user liking a post. We speak about the structure that table should have. And then we ask you to add the following functionality. Display the number of likes of each post. Right? This is something like what we're talking about in the morning, where like Facebook, Twitter shows the post, and underneath, like there is a count of how many people have liked that. That would be a nice to have. Display the users who have liked each post, and filter posts by number of likes. So we're going to be working on this today and half day tomorrow. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Questions?
Have to worry about,
Yeah.
About like deleting or
That's correct.
Or
Updating?
What? Wait.
Mm-hmm. Updating.
Right.
Right. Yeah, we don't want you to worry about that. Yeah. So there's no delete or update. You should still try to do it if you want to see, as well as more practice. More practice, the better. Cool. Let me just make sure that I cover all the basics. So I guess there was this question about, well, yeah, sort of this similar to the SQL injection. This is a question like, what happens if we submit the input box? The input box is blank. What do you think is going to happen? Let's try add this. Add them like that. Submit. we're not getting anything. Our list here is the, let's see, in our database, now we can, this is rec.body that we were looking at some point, seems that are empty strings. Let's look in our database, PSQL, select start from users. Oh, it seems that it's not being inserted. Cool. It's not being inserted. Cool. So yes, this is, we could do this at the, so there is, for dealing with something like this, so let's say they specify, you know, leave one of them blank.
Just fill in one.
Let's fill in one. Let's try this. Submit. Still not being inserted. Yours works.
But I have a number and age, and it comes up with first name, last name, blank.
Let's see.
And only for age, but the names, if you fill those in, it doesn't, and leave everything else blank, it doesn't.
Yeah, there must be some difference in my code. But let's say, for instance, here we're sort of doing a validation, which is because we specified the type, the input box type to be number for the age, they cannot specify here letters, right? I'm trying to type here. I cannot specify any letters, right? So this is sort of some way of input validation where we're not going to let the user enter something that is not allowed. We could do this here. We could also do it in the backend, you know, making sure that the age is going to can be converted to a number. You should always do, there's a thing called defensive programming, especially us web developers, that we should write our servers to be as secure as possible, doing as many checks as possible for whatever the user could, a malicious user could try, right? So one of the things was this SQL injection that we saw. That one is sort of taken care of by PG Promise if we use PG Promise correctly. And so we could do some tests. We could do some input validation on the client, which is sort of like what we're doing there, with specifying that the age has to be a number. We could also do server-side validation to check that something is an email, or maybe checking that the user may not be writing a JavaScript program in our input boxes and then try to execute it somehow. Cool. So we could also then we could also do more validation in our database when we say that, you know, the age has to be a number, an integer, that the first name must not be null, for instance, and so on. So I think that's pretty much it. Any questions before we do the exit ticket and start handing out the lab? Okay, cool. So let's do the exit ticket. I'm gonna be floating around. If you have any questions, start working in that lab, which is expanding this project.